bringing us to the interview now on the economic recovery strategy in the country. Currently joining me, former chairperson, Senate Finance Committee, Mr. Bill Okero. Thank you very much for joining us here on KTN Prime. It would seem international or other countries globally reopening, bringing a spiraling effect into the country. Horticulture topping the list of sectors that are currently looking up. What does that mean for us as a country?
Well, I think it's, I don't share the very high optimism by the central bank governor, but there's no doubt that many of the countries in Europe that have slowly opened up, started by, being very cautious and allowing some of the basic sectors of the economy, the retail industry, restaurants, shops, salons, and this, to start. But I think in Kenya, reality is that the circumstances we have and that in Europe are different. I think if you look at the morbidity and the mortality rates of COVID-19 in Kenya and in Africa in general, is very, very low compared to the situation in those countries. And I think, given that our economic has not support financing or support to those by the, to those sectors, to every sector in this country, what we need to do is to open up the economy immediately. In my view, really, exports may be picking up because of some of the key areas, like even horticulture, by the way. Floriculture is still down completely. And I think when the government says horticulture is generally looking up, we're looking at a few areas in horticulture, things like, people sending still French beans and avocados and a few things here and there. But I think when you go out and you see in reality what is happening, not only those direct farms and institutions that play a significant role, but those indirect ones, you realize that the situation is grim. And I think we need to open up pretty quickly. Otherwise, we depend on subsistence economy. 80% of it is informal, and the SMEs, and these are the ones that are likely to fold up if we go on. Yes,
the CBK governor there talking about this starting to look good, perhaps starting July, saying it will be a gradual process. But when we talk about July, that's about a month away from now. Is it too far-fetched from where you sit?
Well, yes, because we're still under lockdown, which means, on average, many of the companies and the institutions, including manufacturing sector and many of the other sectors, by the way, people are working less than 4 or 5 hours a day. You're clocking at 8, 9, and you have to leave by 3. So productivity is very low. Even those who are working, professional services, financial institutions, and many others that are really working from home, the output is significantly low because of the restrictions. And so when you say July and we're still under lockdown, I think it's really being too optimistic. What I think the government needs to do next week when they review is to really open up the economy as much as they can. Because for one thing, this COVID is already in the community. And the government needs to appreciate that business is more important, really, because that is what, at the end of the day, will put bread. If you look at what actions the government has taken for the truck drivers, for instance, why do you focus on truck drivers? Truck drivers provide the single most important thing in this kind of logistics, movement of goods and services across the borders. The exports you're talking about, Uganda is the single largest trading partner with Kenya. If we cannot export our goods because of locking down drivers in the border for 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, it doesn't make sense. You are not targeting PSVs. This is where the community spread is taken, it is largely responsible for the community spread. But, it's trivializing. The other day in the US, the National Truck Drivers Association were hosted in the White House because of how significant their role is in terms of contribution to goods, movement of goods and services. I think we need to look at, with all due respect, balance the need to maintain health, at the same time to also allow people to generate their livelihoods. All right.
We're talking about next week, anticipation that perhaps some of these restrictions would be eased, like what is happening world over. What are some of the key sectors that we really need to look at when you're talking about starting to reopen the economy gradually that will help ensure that we continue to stay afloat economically?
Well, I think they need to move the curfew out, because that will help significant all sectors, because then people don't need to rush out of town or offices or factories by 2 or 3 o'clock. The other sectors that I think they need to do is if they need to remove the lockdowns in Nairobi and Mombasa, because these 2 counties account for nearly 60–70% of the GDP in this country. And I think the fact that the movement of people into these cities is not allowed affects the businesses of every sector, and not just agriculture, the movement of goods and services. Because if you try to move your goods into this country, and the transportation is limited, and the hours are limited, so it affects really how much so I think, in my view, they need to also remove the lockdowns in the major cities of Nairobi and Mombasa, but allow the other things like social distances and other measures that can enhance the safety of the Kenyans.
One would say it's a very delicate balance for the government now to ensure health safety for its citizens and reopening the economy. But finally, a lot of money to the tune of 53 billion injected into the economy. Do you think this is effective? How much impact are we going to see from this economic stimulus package announced by the president just the other day?
I think any amount of money injected into the economy now through the stimulus would have some impact, yes. However, it may not be significant, because this is an economy whose GDP is, we've got 50 million people, a GDP of 10 trillion plus. I don't think it would really help, and a lot of people are out of jobs. The government may not have really done a study on how the impact of COVID has on employment and on the economy in general, but to some of us, I think you can say that nearly half the jobs in this country have been in jeopardy. And I think today the CBK was saying nearly 3/4 of the SMEs are likely to fall down. And so you're looking at a situation where 53 billion that has been given out may help some of those specific areas of intervention that have been mentioned by the president. But it's really short, far short of the addressing some of the challenges, because what happened is many of the companies, because of reduced demand, because of, and what they have done is laid off employees, they have reduced their investments, they have reduced their, supplies and so forth. And so that has a domino effect in every part of the economy. And you'll see in the next few weeks, even after the economy opens up, you'll still find many of the institutions will be laying off people for lack of adequate demand, for lack of adequate incomes, and so forth. So I think it's not something that we should take lightly. I think the impact on the economy is huge, because it takes time to restart, for businesses to build up, to reach the levels that they were before. And I think government needs to put in more in terms of the stimulus. In my view, really, 53 billion is pretty small amount of money to try and restart the economy.
Great, a way to end. Thank you very much for joining us here tonight. Mr. Bill Okero, former chairperson, Senate Finance Committee, is saying perhaps we are being a bit overambitious, talking about July for sectors to start looking up. A lot of interventions needed to be put in place by the government to ensure that our economy starts afloat. As you know, we're doing badly even before the COVID-19. We'll see how this goes. I want us to quickly